6. Nausicaa, going to a river, near that place to wash the clothes of her father, mother, and brethren, while the clothes were drying, played with her maids at ball, and Odysseus coming forth is fed and clothed, and led on his way to the house of her father, King Alcinous. So there he lay asleep, the steadfast, goodly Odysseus, fordone with toil and drowsiness. Meanwhile, Athene went to the land and the city of the Phaeacians, who of old, upon a time, dwelt in spacious Hyperia, near the Cyclopses dwelt, men exceeding proud, who harried them continually, being mightier than they. Thence the godlike Nausicaa made them depart, and he carried them away, and planted them in Scheria, far off from men that live by bread. And he drew a wall around the town, and builded houses, and made temples for the gods, and meted out the fields. Howbeit, ere this had been stricken by fate, and he had gone down to the house of Hades, now Alcinous was reigning, with wisdom granted by the gods. To his house went the goddess grey-eyed Athene, devising a return for the great-hearted Odysseus. She betook her to the rich wrought bower, wherein was sleeping a maiden, like to the gods in form and comeliness, Nausicaa, the daughter of Alcinous, high of heart. Beside her, on either hands of the pillars of the door, were 2 handmaids, dowered with beauty from the Graces, and the shining doors were shut. Okay, there is a lot to pull apart today in the opening salvo to Book 6. And I don't know where to start or what is really important, not knowing where exactly we're heading. Let me start with this, which doesn't address this specific passage. We'll get there in a second. But I'm reading the Robert Fagel's translation of this story for my own enjoyment while I'm reading along to the prose version from Gutenberg that we're doing on air here. I'm doing that partly to kind of solidify the story in my mind. I also wanted the experience of reading the poem as well. We could have chosen that. I think I mentioned early on, if I haven't, sorry, but I'll give it to you now. There is Gutenberg versions of the poem. There's a very popular one by Alexander Pope. The reason I chose not to do that was that Pope was using the Roman names for gods and the characters. So instead of Odysseus, it's Ulysses. Instead of Zeus, it's Jupiter. And I just didn't want to confuse us for what we're talking about. That's why I chose the prose version, but with some hubris, I will admit. I thought the prose version would be easier to read. As I'm reading the poem, I'm finding that version is actually easier to get the words out of my mouth and make sense of them because they are written with performance in mind. There is a rhythm. We talked about that hexameter before, and you know what the rhythm of a sentiment is going to be by the way that the lines of the poem are broken up and written. With the prose, I'm sometimes struggling to understand how a sentence is constructed and where a single sentence is leading me, which is not always good podcasting. I will be the first to admit that. There is a part of me now that is wishing I had chosen the poem version of this, but we're pot committed at this point. We are not going to shift midstream. A lot of information and new characters thrown at us in this one opening paragraph of Book 6. Butcher and Lang are giving us that introduction to where this book is going to go. Odysseus still asleep beneath the olive trees. It seems like Nausicaa is discovering him, kind of. If not, that is the instinct I have for where we're heading with this. Partly from that opening introduction to where the chapter is heading. But what's happening here really is just kind of orienting us to this new land that Odysseus is, I'm assuming, about to find himself. Otherwise, why introduce it at all? We have King Alcinous. We have Nausicaa. Man, that's going to be a hard name for me to say. Also, it's hard for me to wrap my head and my mouth around that pronunciation because the Studio Ghibli film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is one of my all-time favorite movies, and the Japanese original language pronounces it Nausicaa, which is how it's been ingrained in my head, which almost sounds Russian, but Nausicaa, and having to repeat the double vowel at the end of her name is a bit of a struggle for me. So please have grace with me, the way that the Graces have given beauty to the handmaids of Nausicaa. You see how I did that there? Graces being name-checked with the capital G, the proper noun of Graces. I'm assuming that is in the same realm as Dawn, as we've talked about on the show before. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself into going into who this king is and who Nausicaa is. I'm assuming we are going to learn who they are a bit, and maybe once we see how we're interacting with them in the story, we can go deeper on their history and how it applies, and if it provides us extra context to understand things. But I think the main takeaway here is that this new land that Odysseus finds himself in, the land of the Phaeacians, is set apart from what seems like the rest of civilization. That they have found a place that seems divinely favored. I don't know if it's the king or the gods or a combination of the two, because we do have a line where it says, "And now Alcinous was reigning with wisdom granted by the gods." So whatever the case that illustrates, they are a very ordered kingdom. We get a little bit of a history of how far on the reaches of society this place really is. We get phrases like, "who of old, upon a time," and "where the Cyclopses dwelt," stuff like that, talking about how this land was created, or this kingdom was created, with walls around it and being far off from men that lived by bread. And Athena is going to the house of Alcinous, devising a return for the great-hearted Odysseus. So I'm assuming that's where we're going next. Welcome to Book 6. I'm very glad you're here. Thank you, as always, for joining me on this adventure. Let's see where Book 6 is going to take us, shall we? It's a pretty short one. So until tomorrow, okay, goodbye. Odyssey is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. The show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Odyssey, written by Homer. Theme song by Neuroflow. You can support this show and other shows like it by going to patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.